Good afternoon. My name is Mike Ehrenstein. I'm the 2022 president of the Litigation Council of America. And I'm here today with my friend and wonderful trial lawyer, Joe Blanton. Joe's an attorney from Missouri who has a very varied practice. And Joe is going to be talking with us a little bit today about the importance of outside study to a successful trial practice. So let me give you a very brief introduction of Joe. Joe is, his offices are in Sikeston, Missouri. He has over 3 decades of trial practice under his belt, tried numerous cases. And one of the interesting things about Joe's practice is that he actually kind of crosses disciplines that we typically think of as sort of insular. So he'll try medical malpractice cases, he'll try business litigation cases, and product liability cases, and all manner of cases in between. In fact, he's tried some of these cases so well and so frequently that he has been recognized as I'm going to mess up the title, but like Trial Lawyer of the Year for Products Liability and Trial Lawyer of the Year for Medical Malpractice Defense in Missouri. So with this varied practice comes, I guess, is reflective, I guess, of sort of a broad interest in more than just one thing. And that's what we're here to talk with Joe about and see if there's any wisdom or pearls of wisdom that we can glean from his experience that could be applicable to our trial practices. So first, welcome, Joe.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. My fellowship in the LCA, or senior fellowship, as Steve Henry points out, has been a highlight of my career, and I try to attend the LCA meetings at least once a year and thoroughly enjoy them and love the people.
It's one of the great things about going there is you get to meet genuinely good trial lawyers who actually happen to be genuinely good people and are willing to share, like you're going to share with us today, some of their knowledge. So one of the things that I've gotten to know about you over the last several years is that you're one of those creatures that has an embedded true thirst for learning, a love of learning that was sort of beaten out of me in elementary school. I learned what I had to learn, but not much more. And I'm curious if you could share with us a little bit about your background and where that love of learning for you has come from.
Well, in thinking about that, I attended a parochial school, and we were encouraged to do a book report per week, and had a nice library. And so rather than doing one a week, my best friend there at the school and I engaged in almost a competition to who could do the most book reports. And this is in 3rd grade. And he did over 100 and I did about 89 that year. So we were doing a lot of reading at a young age, and our family is a newspaper family, so the printed word is important to us. My great uncle Jack Blanton was the subject of a Norman Rockwell portrait called The Country Editor in the 1950s. And so if you just Google Norman Rockwell's Country Editor, you'll see my great uncle and my great grandfather's picture on the wall. So newspapers are in our blood. And my father was just a tremendous reader. He was a pediatrician and really liked to read, and read extensively in history. He would read some novels. His choice of novels was not the greatest, but there was just a lot of reading going on in my youth, and it's something that I've always done and have enjoyed. It is the hobby that I enjoy the most, and I'm always reading something. And I like school. I didn't view school as a burden. I enjoyed school. I enjoyed every school I ever went to. I really like law school. You know, some people tell you how much they hated law school. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I liked everything about it, and I enjoyed going to the library during the week. You know, we'd have a good time on. I went to law school in Austin, so we had a good time. But I really enjoyed going to the library and reading the law and being around the other students. So I would say those things. And then, you know, there are people who I admire. I'm a big admirer of Thomas Jefferson. I'm a graduate of his university, and you know, he was a tremendous lover of books, and he was interested in all kinds of different topics. You know, he was a surveyor, he was a historian, he was an agronomist, and I am a big admirer of his. And, you know, to the extent that I'm inspired by him, I guess that's part of it also. But I've just always been around books, always liked them, and with some I've always done.
So part of this is genetic, right? Your love of reading came maybe at least in part from your great grandfather or great uncle who was the editor. You grew up around it, so it's partly enculturated into you. But your passion for the written word, the importance of the written word, is not limited to reading the written word in a case book, in cases that we have to study for our practice. You are voracious and interested in and reading about all kinds of topics.
Correct.
So
and in fact,
that.
Well, kind of a funny story is my father would describe his father, who was the founder of our firm, Harry Blanton. Mr. Harry did not do a lot of outside reading. He only read the law, and in fact would take the Southwestern Reporter that had the Missouri cases home, would take that home and read it from cover to cover whenever there was a new one. Now, you couldn't do that now because the volume of reported cases, but you know, they would get a new Southwestern Reporter every month or two, and he'd take it home and read it from cover to cover. So I don't do that. I do try to stay current, but no, I'm interested in a lot of different things. I get subject matter areas that I'm interested in. Lately, I've been really interested in ancient history, Greek and Roman history. I'm also interested in geopolitics. You know, why do some countries do well, others not do well? Part of that is my interest in that is that, you know, we're living in some very tumultuous times, and trying to understand the effects of globalization, deglobalization, and the internet on how we're going to operate in the future is something I try to get my arms around. But those are kind of areas of interest. Whenever I finish a book, I start thinking about what's the next book I'm going to read. I have a queue of about, I'd say, between 5 and 10 books at any given time. I only read something if I want to read it. I do not read things because I think I ought to. But there's so much good literature and so many good books out there that I'm never out of books to read. My wife tries to tell me no more books, but I still bring them home.
So how is it that, or has it been your experience that your outside study of such divergent topics has had any impact on your practice as a trial lawyer? I mean, you were kind enough to share with me a list of books that you've read over the last few years, and probably 50 books in there on that list. One of them caught my eye. It's a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Correct.
by Jared Diamond. And that was a book that I read a few years ago. And I read it because I was interested. I thought it was a cool topic, and my daughter had read it and suggested that I might like it. But I can't see how that would connect to what I do as a lawyer. How do you make the connection between any of this stuff that you read about geopolitics and history, and how does it inform your practice, if at all?
Well, of course, there are some things I do, and we may talk a little bit later about some of the online courses that I've taken that really relate directly to what we do. I mean, that are really, you can draw the line easily.
Mhm.
I understand your point about some of the books. I read Guns, Germs, and Steel because it's widely considered to be one of the most important history books written in the last 25 years. And I like big history. I'm much more interested in how societies develop and which countries succeed and why do countries act the way they do than I am more local history, though I do read local history also. But I've always been interested in big history, and that's kind of the ultimate big history book. Why is it that society developed where it did and how it did? And why is it that certain parts of the world have been successful and other parts unsuccessful? So I think that's important. I think it does relate to the trial business in this way. What I try to do is what our mutual friend Rick Gass used to call identify the case above the case. That's his language. I call it determining the architecture of the case. What is the case really about? Where are the guardrails in this case? What are things that you can do that matter in the case? And what are things that you just need to take as assumptions? And I do that in every case. I try to figure out what is the case really about. And I make myself type down key points of the case early in the case. What is the case really about? And I think that reading all the history books I've done about situations as varied as the book you identified, Henry Kissinger's book on diplomacy, David Hackett Fisher's book on the 4 waves of migration from England, really are useful to that. Thinking about the ideas, what are things really about? What really matters? And, you can go down the rabbit hole by trying to really understand Plato and Aristotle and Socrates to the point where it's not useful. And I try not to do that. But, I think just having broad general knowledge is useful. And I do think that my judgment is better from knowing about these big historical studies. Another area that I think is important is what I call business intrigue or business scandal. I've read extensively about Enron. As you can expect, right now I'm reading extensively about FTX, trying to understand how this, what is obvious to me, a terrible, massive fraud could happen. How really just trying to understand it. I think it's going to be far reaching. So I think that the broad reading can affect in general your work. It's not as direct as some of the business classes I've taken online, but I think for lawyers, it's the same advice I give to undergrads when they're thinking about going to law school. Take everything.
Yeah.
Take math, take science, take history, take philosophy, take government, because it's all useful and all important.
So at the end of the day, all of this broad reading and broad study has, or I guess liberal study would have an impact on your perspective and the judgment that you bring to bear when you're making decisions about things like what's this case really all about.
I think so.
And you also mentioned that in addition to the 50 books that you've read over the last few years, You read 3 local newspapers, and you've also attended a series of business-related classes from the Harvard University Online. Did I say that correctly? Okay. Tell us a little bit about how that plays into your or informs your practice.
Okay. Those would be kind of in 2 different categories. The reading of the daily papers. I read the biggest paper in Missouri, the Post-Dispatch, then our local papers here in Southeast Missouri. I also read weekly The Economist, which I really like because they have lots and lots of interesting articles that are not 40 pages long. They can give you in about 5 or 6 pages a really good summary of hot topics. I've also read something that my dad used to read, which is called Foreign Affairs, which is the every other month publication from the Council on Foreign Relations. And I just do that for interest, just because it's really interesting to me. I have a real interest in foreign affairs. The online classes I've taken, one of them is a history master's through the University of Edinburgh. I did that from 2015 through 2019. I just did that for fun. I do think it was helpful to me because I learned how to do research online that I really didn't know before. But absolutely essential to what I do are the business classes I've taken, primarily through the Harvard Business School online. I've taken one through Columbia also. I cannot tell you how useful those classes are. The first class was called Core. It was designed by the Harvard Business School for its incoming MBA students to make sure they were competent in economics, accounting, and data analytics. And about half of any class, it's usually about 500 people in each group, are incoming MBA students at the Harvard Business School. And the refresher in accounting and economics were valuable, but was really valuable to me as the data analytics. I was very deficient in that. And I really feel like I now have the ability to really analyze data much better. And I use that all the time.
Can you give us an example of how you use that?
Sure. We do a lot of medical liability work, and frequently the medical issues are not complex, but we do from time to time get medical issues where we really have to get into the literature. And being able to understand the regression analysis, either single variable or multiple variable regression analysis, and whether the results of that study are scientifically valid through the R-squared value and the p-value is something that I had no idea about before I took this. And I'm able to cross-examine authors of their articles about their research on a level after having taken the data analytics course that I don't have. The other area is I've taken some finance classes where you try to figure out values of businesses,
Yes.
values of damages, and understanding cap rates and internal rate of return and the other finance principles that you learn in a class like that have just been invaluable. I use what I've learned through the business classes online daily. I really do. And it is some of the best investment of my time that I've ever done. And that's one area where you can really draw a line directly to the law business.
Sure. I think that's one of the things that separates a lot of business trial lawyers, those that know how to actually read financial statements and really use financial statements to understand valuations and to cross-examine off of them. That's a rarer lawyer than the lawyer that goes, just my expert will take care of it, right? And so I agree with you. I think that's a huge skill set that can be developed that can differentiate us as trial lawyers, and also that can be extraordinarily helpful to our clients. Are there any any lessons learned that you could, if you were to have one of your young lawyers in your firm, like your son just joined your firm, right?
Correct.
Okay, so congratulations on that, by the way, and congratulations to him. He made a great choice. When your son comes into your firm and he's being trained, do you have any advice to him about what types of outside study he ought to be focusing on?
Well, he already does what I do and always has. He was a very interesting young man. He basically taught himself how to read when he was 3 by watching the Sesame Street tapes and learning phonics. And so he's always been a tremendous reader. And he is a much faster reader than I am. I'm about a 30-page an hour reader for a standard book. And if I feel like I didn't get a paragraph, I will reread it. He is an extremely fast reader, and he gets it. He reads very broadly. Now, as a member of the younger generation, he also is a big podcast listener, which I'm not. But he's when he gets really interested in something, he studies it. And for right now, he's very interested in Ukrainian history and politics and geography and really understanding the war in Ukraine. But he has that focus he's always finding something he's really interested in and really studying it. So I think he already does that.
As a budding trial lawyer, would you recommend to him any particular area that he should focus outside study on? Or do you think that just allow, it's funny, the expression, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? I mean,
Right.
he's like you, he's reading like you read very broadly. But whether it's your son or some other young lawyer, is there a particular area of outside study that you would recommend?
I'm a big advocate that you read about what interests you. But I also think it's important that I would say that all the reading has helped me in forming logical arguments. But I also think you need to be able to talk to people on the juries also. And so I think it's also important to go to the coffee shop and chit chat with people, see what's going on around town, to be active civically and all that. So I think just being well-rounded generally is good. I'm a big proponent of reading what interests you, but it's good to have a lot of different interests and to read very widely. I have a rule: if I'm into a book and I don't like it, I think it's not worthwhile. It's not very good, and maybe even dumb. I don't feel the need to finish it because there's so many other good things out there. One area that I want to read about more, and I'm going to read Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. I've done enough background reading that I feel I can tackle that, and that's about 3,000 pages. So it'll take me a while, but I think I want to do that because there are tons of lessons from the Roman Empire and its decline that I think are still useful for us. And I'm going to start reading more fiction. I've gotten away from reading fiction. I don't like current fiction, but there's tons of good American fiction out there. And in Russian fiction, I want to reread the Brothers Karamazov and War and Peace sometime soon.
Only another 3,000 pages.
Well, there. War and Peace is very long. The Brothers is about 800 pages, but
wow. Well, would you mind if we shared with our followers your list of reading for the last few years?
And I hope that if they can find one book on that list that they think is useful and entertaining, that they do so.
Great. Joe, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us this afternoon. I really appreciate it, and I know all of our fellows will as well.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great one.
All right.